for the past 11 years, and I'm a member of the committee that is sponsoring this event today. Our panel discussion is Transportation Infrastructure Challenges and Future Solutions. And we have a distinguished panel today, in my opinion, a who's who of Wisconsin transportation. Mark Gottlieb, a former state legislator, is the Secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. Craig Thompson is the Executive Director of the Transportation Development Association. Jason Kulata is the Lead Transportation Policy Advisor for Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce. And Mike Colas is the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Towns Association. And Jack Dittmar is the Monroe County Highway Department Commissioner and has been for the last 17 years here in Monroe County. In 1975, I went to work for the Office of Public Affairs in the Wisconsin Department of Transportation in Madison. At that time, it was attached to the Secretary's office. I don't know if it still is, but it is. Okay, and the governor at that time was Patrick Lucy. Some of you may remember him. I worked at DOT for 8 years, and when I started there, we started talking about unmet transportation infrastructure needs in the state of Wisconsin. And we continued to talk about those unmet needs for 8 years. After my time at DOT, I moved downtown and I worked in the state senate as a staffer for 20 years. And among other things, I did the transportation issues there. And we continued talking about unmet transportation needs during the 20 years that I worked in the state senate. The voters in 2003 thought that we ought to find another line of work. So we did, and I came back to Sparta, which is my home. And I've been on the county board since 2005. We've continued to talk about transportation, unmet transportation needs during this time, and we still haven't been able to find a political resolve to get these problems straightened out. The Wisconsin, or the U.S. DOT says that the state of Wisconsin has 14% of its bridges deficient, and it says 71% of our highways are not up to snuff. And they got these figures for every state in the union, and they're much the same. So, Secretary Gottlieb, why don't you come up and tell us? Now wait, this guy has been working for solutions. I know that, and I'll let him get into it. But why don't you tell us about the challenges and the solutions that we need to come up with to take care of this stuff?
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And it's really appropriate that this group is here at an economic development conference talking about transportation infrastructure, because I think all of us really, and most of you in the economic development community or the business community, understand that our state's economy is really about industry, agriculture, and tourism. And all of those, in order to be successful in a global economy, right? Agriculture becoming much more globalized, manufacturing certainly been globalized for a long time. If Secretary Klett from the Tourism Department was here, she would tell you how they're competing every day to try to make people want to come and visit Wisconsin and spend their money here. All of those require a safe and efficient transportation system to be successful in a global economy. So it's really appropriate that we're here at an economic development conference talking about transportation infrastructure. Transportation is not a good in itself. It's a means to an end to grow our economy, keep our people safe, keep our people employed, and move our state forward and improve our quality of life for all of our citizens and businesses. So we've been fortunate, I think, over the years to continue, and this continues to this day, to make significant investments in our state's transportation system. We've been able to do that. We once again, this year, for example, in the state highway program, we once again, it's been several years in a row, that we will let over $1 billion worth of contracts to preserve and improve our state's highway system. Our second biggest investment as a state will be in local aids to Mike's constituent townships and to the counties and to the city, every city, village, town, and county in the state. That's 25% of our transportation budget to help them meet their growing and expanding transportation needs. So we've been able to make a lot of robust investments. And unfortunately, though, there are some dark clouds on the horizon. I think that's what we're going to talk about here. One of the things I'll tell you is that our ability to make some of the investments that we've made, and I think there's coming to be a growing consensus about this, that we've made those, we've relied probably, come to rely a little bit too much on the credit card to make some of these investments. We've continued to make them, but again, like anything else, transportation investments are long life physical infrastructure investments, just like your house. Whoever paid cash for your house, raise your hand. Probably not too many people. You want to, pay for that asset over the life that you have it. The same is true of a major highway project. But again, that mortgage payment that you make or that debt service payment that we have to make on the highway system, that's the first dollar draw on your paycheck, right? And that's the first dollar draw on our revenues too. So we want to be careful about how we're managing that. And if you look at the last, let's say about the last 15 years roughly, 15 years ago, we spent about $1 out of every $16 that came into our transportation fund. About one of every $16 went right off the top to pay debt service for projects that we'd already built. Okay. Today, that number is that is over 1 out of every 6 cents. And at the rate we're going, it will be about 1 out of every 4 cents within a few years. So I think clearly most of us recognize that there's been a place for bonding in the transportation program, and there will continue to be that, but again, we need to do it in a responsible and a manageable way. So we've made those investments, we've probably borrowed a lot of money to do it. Now going forward, what are we going to do? Well, our needs continue to expand, and you hear a lot about some of these, what we refer to as mega projects, the projects over $500 million that we're building in the Madison area or in Milwaukee. You look at the I-39 project from Beloit up to Madison, or you look at some of the freeway projects we're doing in the Milwaukee area. And granted, those are big projects, they're high dollar investments, and they're very needed investments because they're not just really for those areas, they're regional investments, they're investments for our whole state. Obviously, you're bringing tourists up here to this area or to the Dells or wherever. Many of them are coming from Illinois. They're coming up I-3990, right? And we want them to have a good modern facility to do that on. Same as much of the commerce and industry in our state moves through the southeast Wisconsin, moves through the Fox Valley where we've just made a $1.5 billion investment in U.S. Highway 41. So those are the investments that get a lot of attention. But on the other hand, we can't neglect the fact that our core mission as an agency is to preserve and protect the investment and infrastructure that our forefathers have made in 72 counties all around the state, Monroe County and everywhere. So those projects, I guess I want to tell you, those projects, we don't want this to become, this discussion that we're going to have, to become a, Milwaukee and Madison versus the rest of the state, or southeast versus outstate, or whatever, however you want to describe it in the capital. It really shouldn't be that kind of a discussion. We have needs in every one of our state's 72 counties. Those needs are on the state system, they're on the county system, they're on every city, village, and town has them. So we need to find a partnership answer. And I know the panel is going to be talking about this. This is going to be a challenge, but really, why are we facing this? Again, a little bit too much reliance maybe on the bonding. As we go forward and we look at the revenues, I'll just throw out one number to you, okay? About 80 cents out of every dollar that comes into our transportation fund comes from one of two sources. Motor fuels tax, 30.9 cents per gallon that you pay every time you fill up at the pump, or that vehicle registration fee that you pay, $75 for a car, more for a light truck or a heavy truck, obviously. So, but those two sources of revenue, that's about 80% of the money that comes into our state's transportation fund. And we do, I think, a pretty good job of modeling where those revenues are going to be going forward. And if you look at the next, say you look out about 10 years, and if I showed you a graph, and this graph is readily available, if I showed you the graph of those projected revenues over the next 10 years, it would be almost as flat as this podium, okay? We are not bringing in any new money, but we know our state's growing, we want to attract businesses, our population is growing, our system's deteriorating, we want to make safety improvements, we want to reduce congestion, all those things cost money. And so it's clear to us that those revenues under our current scheme of revenue are not going to be there in the future. And that is going to force us If that doesn't change, that is going to force us to make some, as a state together, to make some very difficult choices. Now, we at the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, it is not my job. As Bruce mentioned, I used to serve in the legislature. I am not a policymaker anymore. I administer a great agency full of a lot of people who are dedicated to our mission to provide a safe and efficient transportation system for the state. But I'm not going to be the guy that's going to decide, and we're not going to decide at WISDOT how we're going to deal with this problem or how we're going to solve it. What our role as an agency is, and what I'm very proud of how we do this, our role is really two things. One is to be the most efficient, cost-effective, transparent, and accountable agency that we can be. And we have spent, I can tell you, and I'm so excited about this, I would love to talk to you about it for another hour, but I won't. But we've spent much of the last several years becoming a much more performance-driven organization, a much more data-driven organization. And so we know that that's our responsibility. Before we can come to the public or we can ask the legislature or the governor to give us more money, we need to show you and everybody else that we are a cost-effective and accountable and transparent agency. And so we're working very hard to do that. That's one of our responsibilities. The other one is to be an information resource. And we've worked very hard so that when legislators or the governor or the media or whoever has a question about what does it look like for the future, I've thrown out some future numbers to you, and we have a lot more data than that they feel that they can come to us and say, tell us, I'm not going to make those decisions, but tell us, Mr. Secretary, if we invest this much money in these programs, what's our system going to look like in 5 years? How many deficient bridges are we going to have? What's the condition of our pavement going to be? How much delay is going to take place? What's the travel time reliability is going to be in urban areas? And we can answer all those questions. So that's the second thing that I think is our role, to be the experts, if you will, about transportation for our state. And the last thing I will tell you that I think is our core mission at the department is partnerships. I'm sitting here in a panel with some business folks, with some industry stakeholders, with some local government people. We couldn't be successful in what we do without cultivating the strong partnerships that we have with every county in the state. We're the only state in the country where the maintenance of our state transportation system is not done by the state. It's done by 72 county highway departments. We pay them to do that. They're our partners. And we're working very hard to cultivate that partnership and make it be more productive. Same with every city, village, and town that we're helping to make sure that they have, not only through local aids, but through other programs, to make sure that they have safe and efficient transportation system as much as we can provide it, and certainly to work real closely with our federal partners as well. We're just happy to say a new federal transportation bill passed, which is going to give us a little bit more money, which is very welcome over the next 5 years that bill is for. But we rely, about 25% of our total department budget comes from Washington, D.C. So we watch very carefully what happens in D.C., obviously, and we work very closely with our partners at the Federal Highway Administration and with our industry partners as well, and with our consultant partners, because all of us need to work together to make sure that we're investing our money as efficiently as we can. But again, we face some serious needs. The revenues are not growing. I know you're going to hear more about this. We just had a commission that was created by the legislature that reported out in 2013 that we probably need over $6 billion of new money over the next 10 years just to sort of continue to tread water with the system that we have. So many challenges being faced, many different options out there to answer those problems. And I just would say to all of you, encourage you to, number one, just stay engaged in this issue. I don't think anybody has a monopoly on the right answer for any of this, but we need not only transportation stakeholders, but people in the economic development community, people in the business community who rely on our transportation system to stay engaged in this issue, engaged with your policymakers, engaged with your local communities and your other colleagues in business to make sure that as we go forward, we're talking about the right things and ultimately together we'll make the right decisions.
Yesterday I read a column in Bloomberg by a guy, I can't remember his name, but he argued forcefully that the electric vehicle business is about to explode in this country with cars with ranges up to 200 miles without recharging. What would that do to your primary revenue source if we had millions of cars in this country with electric cars with ranges of 200 miles?
So certainly, as Craig pointed out, or I think it was Craig or Mike pointed out, vehicles are becoming much more fuel efficient. The gas tax is a per gallon tax, so if you have a more efficient vehicle, you're paying less for every mile that you travel. There are a variety of alternative fuel vehicles which are growing and growing. We only have right now about 65,000 electric vehicles in the state of Wisconsin out of 4-some million vehicles, but clearly that is a growing area. I think our opinion would be that, so we take about 60% of our revenue from the gas tax, a little over $1 billion a year, 60% of our state revenue. I think I would say that we believe, and I think most states would concur, that for the short to intermediate future, the gas tax will remain a viable source of, will remain viable as a major source of funding if it can be appropriately adjusted and if some other little adjustments can be made. For example, other states have said with electric vehicles, with hybrid vehicles, they've adjusted their registration fees to make them pay a little bit more in road use that they're not paying, when they don't buy fuel. So there are little tweaks and things that you can do. So I think we feel that, I think most people would agree that have studied the issue. In the long term, in the long term, we are going to need a different model. Whether that's vehicle miles traveled like Jason talked about or something like that, who knows that yet, what that will be. We will need a new model. But for the short to intermediate term, the next decade, especially if you're willing to make some little adjustments here and there on the margins, I think we believe the gas tax remains the most viable source to raise a significant amount of money that would be needed, because it is a tax that has a number of advantages, two of which are it's extremely cheap to collect. It's not hard to collect, and it is very hard to evade. And that's two attributes you're always looking for in taxes, which are not necessarily true in some of the other revenue sources like tolling or other ones, which have big upfront costs and a lot more evasion and so forth and so on.
Thank you, Secretary Gottlieb. Wisconsin has something like 112,000 miles of roads and streets and state, federal, and local roads and streets. And 62,000 of those miles, I believe, are under the jurisdiction of our 1,200 and some town governments. Mike Colas, why don't you give us the town perspective here?